is it playing? Oh yeah. There was a slight change of plans. I found something a little more topical. Hello and welcome to Streamin Reviews, a show where I take a look at series that are only available through streaming services like Crunchyroll or Netflix. And, yeah, confession time. Between the new job, the move to accommodate for said job, and my internship, long story, I hadn't really had much time to sit down and re-watch the show I'd originally wanted to do for episode 2. So instead, we're going to be taking a look at one of the famed Marvel Netflix shows. You guys did read the title, right? Besides, I already reviewed Daredevil Season 1 back in 2015 with Duke CT. If you guys want to know my thoughts on that, it's damn near an hour long, but I'll put a link to it both in the cards up in the corner if you're watching here on YouTube, or in the description below if you're watching anywhere else. No, this time, in time for the release of its second season, and by that I mean a week later, we're taking a look at Season 1 of Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones is based on the Marvel Comics character of the same name, originally created by Brian Michael Bendis in 2001 as Jessica Campbell, a classmate to one Peter Parker. After being the sole survivor of a car accident claiming the lives of the rest of her family, she woke up from a coma to find she had super strength and limited invulnerability, and was eventually adopted by the Jones family. After witnessing a fight between Spider-Man and Sandman, she decided to try and use her powers for good, and eventually took up the mantle of Jewel, but decided to change her name several times because, as her television counterpart, portrayed by the bee in Apartment 23 herself, Kristen Ritter, so eloquently put it,
Jewel is a stripper's name, a really slutty stripper.
In 2010, writer Melissa Rosenberg would option the series, originally titled AKA Jessica Jones, to ABC the following year. Unfortunately, ABC passed on the series. Luckily, it was announced in 2013 that Jones would be one of 4 heroes who would get their own Netflix miniseries, which would also include Daredevil, Luke Cage, formerly known as Power Man, as well as Danny Rand, better known as the immortal Iron Fist, to serve as the lead-ins for their own superhero team, the Defenders. Jessica Jones would star Ritter as the titular character, Mike Coulter as Luke Cage, Carrie Ann Moss as attorney Jerry Hogarth, Rachel Taylor as Trish Walker, and of course, Kevin Kilgrave Thomas, played by this little-known actor. You may or may not have heard of him. But I'll get more into that later. For now, let's talk about the theme song. The theme itself was composed by Sean Callery and has a jazzy feel to it that helps invoke the film noir vibes the initial trailer gave off. Though it's not without its problems. Mainly that while giving off the film noir feeling, the start of the intro feels more like elevator music than the theme song for a badass PI with super strength. However, as off as the theme music does feel, the visuals do help convey the tone for the series. Not as well as, say, Daredevil or Punisher's intros, but it's definitely one of the better intros for Marvel's Netflix division. Now, despite the fact that it's been a little over 2 years since the series was released, and the Blu-ray itself was only released this past August, thank you Netflix, I'm going to go ahead and put a spoiler warning ahead of the next section for anyone who hasn't seen Jessica Jones yet. If you want to avoid these spoilers, skip ahead to this time code right here. As for everyone else, brace yourselves, this is going to be a long one. The series opens with AKA Ladies' Night with a montage of Jessica as a PI with a narration about finding the worst in people, ending with her throwing a man that she was following for a client through the door to her apartment. We then cut to the office of Hogarth, Chow, and Benowitz, where we're quickly introduced to Pam, played by Susie Abermay, who is the assistant to Jerry Hogarth. Also, Jerry is having an affair with Pam. That's not me being disgusting, that is literally the bulk of Jerry's storyline this season. Along with trying to divorce her wife Wendy, played by Robin Weigart. Anyways, Jessica immediately goes to Jerry looking for another job. We get some exposition about Jessica being, shall we say, aggressive. Long story short, Jess asks Jerry if she has any cases, and she does. We get a quick scene with Jess following and taking pictures of Luke Cage. And then we cut to the next morning where we're not only introduced to Jessica's junkie neighbor Malcolm Ducasse, played by former RPM Red Ranger Eka Darville. That's 2 former Power Rangers that have shown up in a Marvel Netflix show. The other was Nikolai Nikolaev. He played a Russian mobster in Daredevil Season 1, and the Rhino Ranger in Power Rangers Jungle Fury. So, pissed off, Jessica throws Malcolm out, only to be introduced to the Schlottmans, Barbara and Bob, who came to Jessica with a case. Their daughter Hope, played by Erin Moriarty, has gone missing. Sort of. Jess takes the case and gets in contact with Hope's friend, who reveals that Hope left her high and dry to stay with a guy. Cut back to her apartment where she imagines someone licking her, and it's revealed that Jess has PTSD.
Birch Street. Higgins Drive. Cobalt Lane.
Jerry calls to congratulate Jess for a job well done, revealing what I mentioned earlier, and after scoping out a bar, meets Cage face to face. He offers her a free drink, claiming it's ladies' night. Smooth. So Jess agrees, reveals she's a PI, and then they proceed to have coffee. And by that, I mean...
I just had sex, and it felt so good.
Afterwards, Jessica cleans up and finds a picture of a woman in Luke's bathroom, which seems to disturb her, and she promptly leaves. We then get a montage of the Schlottman case with Jess tracking purchases. Lingerie, ties, Asian restaurants that trigger her. And I don't say that to be an edgy asshole. This is leading to a memory that's actually triggering her PTSD.
Birch Street. Higgins Drive.
She has a flashback where everything goes purple. It's a running theme during the first few episodes. It's supposed to be a form of foreshadowing since Kilgrave is known as the Purple Man in the comics. And she sees herself sitting with a man who tells her she'll love a certain dish and that she should smile. In the midst of a full-on panic attack, she runs off to meet with the Schlottmans and demands to know who recommended her for the case. Bob reveals that it was a British man talking to a desk sergeant at the police station. Jess tells him to get the hell out of Dodge and proceeds to try and buy a ticket to Hong Kong using Hope's card and fails. After Jerry refuses to help, she decides to ask an old friend, Trish Walker. Trish chews Jess out for shutting her out, and Jess reveals that he's back. Trish initially doesn't believe her, but after Jessica tells her how she found out, tries to convince her to help. Jess refuses, claiming she knows what he can do, so Trish relents, giving Jess the money she needs. On her way to the airport, she changes her mind and decides to head to the hotel to try and save Hope. She arrives, pulls the fire alarm to get all the other guests out of the hotel, and enters the room to find Hope all alone. She calls the Schlottmans and tells them to meet her at her office. After a little difficulty from Hope, who Kilgrave told not to move, he has mind control powers if you haven't already figured it out yet. Jess carries Hope to her office, and after a brief heart-to-heart, she reunites with the Schlottmans. Unfortunately, it's short-lived. Distraught, Jess tries to catch a taxi to the airport, but changes her mind in the last minute. The next episode, aka Crush Syndrome, starts with Detective Oscar Clemens, played by Clark Peters, interrogating her about Hope. Clemens reveals the photos Jess had been taking of Cage, but Jess shuts him down, claiming,
"The only thing that you can charge me with is trying to make a goddamn living in this goddamn city."
She then proceeds to proclaim herself the goddamn Batman. Jess goes to see Luke, only to find him being accosted by two NYPD officers. After they leave, Luke rightfully chews her out, but Jess claims she was hired by a man who was worried his wife was having an affair, and Luke rightfully kicks her out. Later, Jess goes to meet Hope in prison to try and get some answers. Hope doesn't say much, except that Kilgrave is apparently obsessed with Jessica and wants to make her suffer like he suffered. Jess tries to ask Jerry to take her case, but she refuses, claiming Hope is a lost cause. Jess tells Jerry she'll convince her of Kilgrave's powers, and that if Jerry takes the case, she'll owe her one. On the way back, Trish meets up with Jess to try and help. Jess initially blows her off, but accepts after a guilt trip. They talk about how they're going to stop Kilgrave, and Jess realizes she needs to find his weakness. Trish offers to help, again, but Jess tells her to stay away for her own protection. While looking into the articles from the night Kilgrave died, we're introduced to Jessica's upstairs neighbors, Ruben, played by Kieran Mulcair, let's call him Anson Pillsbury, and his twin sister Robin, played by Colby Minifie. Let's call her a pain in the ass.
Because she clearly doesn't understand jack about Cordon Bleu.
You're all alone, so you have to pick away at other people's happiness.
I feel your sadness, but where is your rage? Aren't you sick of hearing yourself talk and talk and talk?
Jeez, and I thought Cam from Mako Mermaids was bad. Anyways, after that unwelcome interruption, Jess gets a flashback to the night Kilgrave died and decides to investigate the closest hospital where the accident happened, Metro General. After stealing some scrubs to break in, Jess asks a nearby nurse to help her find ER records from that night, only to find no record of Kilgrave being at the hospital. After accidentally beating the hell out of a contractor Trish sent to fix her door, Jess decides to track down the ambulance driver who picked up Kilgrave that night. only to find out the man gave both his kidneys to Kilgrave and is now on dialysis, most likely paid for by Kilgrave. After taking the number for the dialysis machine, she vows to find Kilgrave, only for the driver to beg Jess unplug him. Jess refuses and leaves, and after an encounter with Ensign Pillsbury and the pain in the ass...
Hands off my brother, cougar.
Jess is visited by the lady who was having an affair with Luke, revealing that her husband didn't even know she was having an affair, but does now and is going with his rugby team to beat the hell out of Luke. Jess runs off to help him out, and they accidentally reveal their powers to each other while she and Luke literally toss guys around the bar. The next morning, with the help of the company that makes the dialysis machine, Jess tracks down the doctor that leased it, and he immediately tries to run. Jess manages to catch up with him, and the doctor reveals that Kilgrave refused to be put under for transplant. Jess puts 2 and 2 together and decides to find a way to get a hold of some sufentanil, a surgical-grade anesthesia. After forcing the good doctor to tell Jerry everything he knows, Jerry agrees to take Hope's case. After a scene where Kilgrave enters someone else's apartment, convinces them to let him stay, tells the children to lock themselves in the closet, and forces the parents to make him dinner, cleaning a steak knife in the process, Jess finds Luke in her apartment, revealing he knows about her powers while revealing his in the process.
You can't fix me. I'm unbreakable.
The next episode, aka It's Called Whiskey, features the two bonding over their powers while Jess also tracks down some sufentanil to deal with Kilgrave. Jerry sets up an interview for Hope on Trish's talk show. Yeah, she has that. She's also a former child star. Trish uses the story to convince anyone who may have spoken to Kilgrave to get in touch with Jerry, and then proceeds to taunt him on air. I wouldn't do that if I were you. He is the doctor after all. Needless to say, this pisses off Kilgrave, and he sends NYPD officer Will Simpson, played by Will Traval, to try and do her in. Jess arrives and manages to save Trish by using some of the sufentanil she managed to swipe from a nearby hospital to convince Will that he killed her. She then proceeds to follow him back to the apartment Kilgrave is staying at, only for him to order Will to walk off the balcony. Jess quickly pulls Will off the ledge and has a brief confrontation with Kilgrave, which includes a flashback to the night she thought he died. Kilgrave points out that Will is about to jump off the ledge again, so Jess once again pulls him off and knocks him out this time, only to find that Kilgrave has run away. After that, Jess heads back up to canvass the apartment, only to find a whole room full of pictures of her. Jess then uses a loophole to free Will from Kilgrave's control by carrying him down to the street and telling him she caught him when he comes to. The next episode, aka 99 Friends, is mostly filler with Jess being accosted by a lady who blames gifted people like Jess for what happens in The Incident, aka the Chitauri invasion from the Avengers. She and Jerry go through a list of people who have been affected by Kilgrave, and Trish and Will begin to build a relationship because reasons. But there is a big reveal at the end that the man who'd been spying on her, taking the pictures she found in Kilgrave's apartment, was her neighbor Malcolm. Unfortunately, the next episode, aka The Sandwich Saved Me, doesn't immediately follow through on this plot point, instead starting with Jess having a flashback to her time as a superhero dressed like a hoagie. It also includes a little nod to her first superhero identity.
Jewel is a great superhero name.
Jewel is a stripper's name.
Back to the present, and the gang decides to follow Malcolm in order to lead them to Kilgrave so she, Trish, and much to Jess's disdain, Will can capture him. They follow Malcolm to Kilgrave, and it's revealed that he specifically got him addicted to drugs so that he can control him even after his powers wear off. Apparently, Kilgrave's control wears off after, 12 hours with no contact. The next day, they follow Malcolm to the location, and Will is able to nail Kilgrave with a sufentanil-filled dart thanks to a distraction by Jess, and they quickly pull him into the van they rented. Unfortunately, as soon as they get to an undisclosed location, it's revealed that Kilgrave is wearing a wire, and they're soon attacked by hired goons.
Hired goons?
You have no idea how long I've been waiting for an excuse to use that clip. Long story short, the goons manage to get away with Kilgrave, and Jess decides to go help Malcolm beat his addiction. After that, we jump straight into the next episode, aka You're a Winner. It's kind of another filler episode, but it's also really dark. Kilgrave uses his powers to win a poker game so he can use the money to buy Jess's childhood home. That's not the dark part. Hope, having just been beaten up by a fellow inmate, reveals to Jess that she's pregnant and Kilgrave's the father. Getting warmer. So she paid the inmate to try and get her to miscarry. And since that didn't work, Jess asks Jerry to provide her with a, different option. Jesus, can this get any darker?
Collect what you can. Deliver it to the lab at this address.
On a lighter note, Sort of. Luke hires Jess to track down the brother of someone who has evidence on the death of his wife, Reva Connors, who had left instructions in a box Jess had taken under Kilgrave's orders unbeknownst to Luke. They manage to track down the brother, and they're given a file on the bus driver who hit Kilgrave and who Luke believes killed Reva. Luke finds out the driver was drunk and goes to kill him, but Jess intervenes and reveals that she was the one who killed Reva under Kilgrave's orders. Naturally, and rightfully so, Luke is pissed and tells Jess he never wants to see her again. Jesus, that was a dark one. Here's hoping the next episode's a little...
Tell me, who are you?
My name is Ruben. I'm her neighbor. I made her banana bread.
Why?
Because I love her.
So with Ensign Pillsbury now toast... Jess, having found Ruben's corpse in her apartment after Malcolm takes her home from a bender, decides she'll take his head to the local police station, hoping to be sent to a supermax prison so that once Kilgrave eventually comes after her, his abilities can be caught on camera. Unfortunately, Kilgrave interrupts her confession to Detective Clemens by taking control of the station, confessing his love for Jessica, and threatening to have every cop in the station kill themselves unless she agrees to come home with him. Reluctantly, Jess agrees and is seen walking into a childhood home by Simpson, who had been tracking Kilgrave with the help of some old mercenary buddies. The next episode, aka WWJD, follows Jess over the next few days, sans her phone, which Kilgrave took to prevent her from recording his abilities, though she's able to get a hold of Simpson's phone after catching him try and plant a bomb in the house. She quickly tells Kilgrave about the bomb, as she's not willing to kill him until Hope's been cleared of her murder charges. After a scene that features what has to be some of the best acting in the show...
It doesn't matter what you were trying to do. You raped me again and again and again.
How am I supposed to know? Huh? I never know if someone is doing what they want or what I tell them to.
Oh, poor you.
You have no idea.
Kilgrave shows Jess what was on Reva's thumb drive. It turned out his parents conducted experiments on him as a child, which he blames for making him a rat bastard. Jess is less than sympathetic, but tries to get Kilgrave to use his powers to help someone. Unfortunately, she's horrified to learn that A, he's still more than willing to try and kill a criminal after stopping him from killing his family, which Jess is able to stop, and B, the action only serves to fuel his ego.
I want cake! Chocolate with strawberries on top.
After leaving to have a brief talk with Trish, Jess returns, as Kilgrave had threatened to have his servants kill themselves if she didn't, with Chinese food. Kilgrave is initially suspicious that Jess is trying to drug him, but she quickly eases his suspicions, before revealing she drugged his servants instead. Before he fully realizes what happened, she manages to inject him with sufentanil and escapes as Simpson and his buddies arrive, only to be seriously injured by his own bomb, which Kilgrave had Jess's old neighbor give to him. The next episode has Trish rush Simpson to the hospital, where he demands to see a doctor from his days in the army, Dr. Kozlov, who gives him pills that somehow heal all his injuries. Meanwhile, Jess locks Kilgrave in a hermetically sealed room to try and torture him into using his abilities on camera. Jerry tells Jess that this would lead to Hope's case being thrown out and that the DA has offered a plea deal of 15 to 20 years if she pleads guilty. Jones tells Hope not to take it, and after trying to beat Kilgrave into using his powers, only for Trish to stop her using a kill switch that delivers a shock to everyone inside, looks over the footage on Reva's thumb drive and learns the name of Kilgrave's parents, Albert and Louise Thompson. After finding a photo, Jess realizes Mama Kilgrave, played by Lisa Emery, is actually a member of the Kilgrave Victim Support Group and goes to confront her and Albert, played by Michael Saberi. They reveal that he had a degenerative brain disease, so they decide to alter his DNA, which is what gave him his powers. Jess takes them to see Kilgrave, and after Detective Clemens arrives at the invitation of Jessica, they have a bit of an intense heart-to-heart.
I wondered if that would make you proud of me.
Oh, of course we're proud of you, Kevin. We love you.
Then why did you leave?
Your mother nearly died after what you did to her.
I was 10, I had a tantrum like a normal child. I didn't know what I was doing, you didn't explain to me, you just left.
That gets made worse when, claiming she wants to make things right, Louise stabs her son with a pair of scissors she must have snuck out of the hotel room. Kilgrave takes this rather well.
For every year that you left me alone, stab yourself.
And then everything goes to plaid. Unfortunately, the kill switch doesn't work. It's revealed in the next episode that someone, most likely Jerry, cut it, and Louise... yeah. Jerry makes a mad dash to get out of there as Jess tries to save Albert from suffering the same fate as his wife. Trish decides to shoot through the window to try and stop Kilgrave, emptying her revolver in the process. Jess manages to stop Albert from stabbing himself as Kilgrave escapes, telling Trish to put a bullet in her head, not realizing she's out of ammo. He also orders Clemens to follow him, not realizing Jess handcuffed him to a pipe, so we get the lovely image of Clemens breaking his hand in order to slip out. Jess tries to stop Kilgrave, grabbing his arm, but then...
Let go of me, Jessica!
So realizing that's probably not going to work, he quickly orders Clemens to get Jessica off him, and the episode ends with Jessica making a shocking realization.
Let go of me, Jessica! Get back here, Jessica! No, Jessica!
Yeah, according to the Wikipedia, Jessica apparently does have the ability to block mind control. So if I had to guess, I'd say the shock of killing Reva is what awakened that. After that, we jump into the next episode, aka 1,000 Cuts, where Kilgrave, having immediately run into Jerry, forces her to take him to see a doctor. Naturally, she takes him to her soon-to-be ex-wife, Wendy, who, need I remind you, Jerry had been cheating on with her assistant, Pam. And something I should have mentioned earlier, Jerry had asked Jessica to serve Wendy the divorce papers as payments for taking Hope's case. Very drunk Jess would do this during the opening of episode 7, aka Top Shelf Perverts, essentially threatening to kill Wendy if she didn't agree to Jerry's terms. So Wendy's not exactly on the best terms with her soon-to-be ex-wife right now. Long story short, after having a heart-to-heart with Wendy, Kilgrave tells her to kill Jerry with 1,000 cuts before escaping. Luckily, Pam arrives and kills Wendy. Back to Jessica, and after freeing Trish from Kilgrave's order by shoving an empty shell in her mouth, thus putting a bullet in her skull, Albert reveals that Kevin's abilities are a sort of virus that he releases, and, knowing that Jessica is immune to his influence, thinks he can create a vaccine. Later, Simpson, having been given those superpower drugs by Dr. Kozlov, arrives at the cell to meet with Clemens, who has just finished gathering together all the evidence the group has collected on Kilgrave. Deciding that Kilgrave is too dangerous to live, the Kingpin decides to kill the weathered news reporter. Whoops, sorry, that's Daredevil. My mistake. The future Nuke decides to kill the weathered detective and proceeds to destroy all the evidence of Kilgrave's powers. Because not only is he kind of an idiot, but he's an asshole too. He quickly tracks down Trish and Albert, who are unsuccessful in creating the vaccine, and Trish tells Will to piss off when she realizes he's gone pants-on-head nanners. Though not before she swipes some of his super drugs. Back to Kilgrave, who gets Hope released from prison and eventually trades her freedom for his father. Unfortunately, this freedom would prove to be short-lived, as Hope, realizing she's the only reason Kilgrave is still alive, takes away that reason. And the episode ends with Hope dying in Jess's arms, and Jess coming to terms with what she now has to do. The next episode does focus more on Trish, having Jess flash back to being adopted by the Walkers and waking up from the accident that may or may not have killed her family. It's revealed that Trish's mother Dorothy was one of those abusive stage parents, and after discovering her powers, Jess had apparently tried to strong-arm her into stopping the abuse. Back to the present, Jess, having covered up Hope's death, starts searching the morgues for Papa Kilgrave. Unfortunately, due to a lack of sleep, Jess is hit by a car in the process, injuring her ribs. She does manage to find Clemens' corpse and quickly deduces that Simpson killed him, not Kilgrave. Realizing this, she settles to meet with Simpson, who tries to kill her. Trish arrives on the scene and uses the super drugs to help Jones beat the crap out of him. Unfortunately, because Will had tossed the downers out the window before Trish had popped the uppers, she immediately passes out, requiring a doctor, so Jess leaves Will alone to take Trish to the hospital. Kozlov immediately retrieves Simpson, where we won't see him again until season 2. The episode ends with Kilgrave calling Jessica, telling him he found Cage, and she goes to warn him, only to arrive as the bar explodes with Luke inside. The next episode, aka Take a Bloody Number, immediately picks up where we left off, with an obviously unharmed Luke.
I'm unbreakable.
Revealing to Jessica that Kilgrave ordered him to destroy the bar. Gee, I wonder if this is all an elaborate trap set up by Kilgrave to try and have Luke kill Jessica. Meanwhile, Dorothy visits Trish in order to give her some info on Kozlov, claiming that he works for a company called IGH, which was also apparently the company that not only paid for Jessica's treatment after the accident, but may have been the group responsible for giving her powers. Back to Jess and Luke. After Luke tells Jess how he followed her to confront Kilgrave, they deduce that Kilgrave is keeping Albert alive so he can find a way to boost his abilities, with Luke forgiving Jones for her role in his wife's death. They arrive at a nightclub where Kilgrave was testing his new powers, where, shock of all shocks, Kilgrave reveals that everything Luke said was part of a trap he set up, and he then proceeds to sick Luke on Jess. Jess gets the crap kicked out of her due to her injured ribs, and is only able to stop Luke with a point-blank shotgun blast to the face. This leads to the final episode, aka Smile, with Jess rushing Luke to a local hospital, where she meets Claire! Sorry, but you can imagine I actually did squeal a little when I was first watching the series, because Claire, well, she'd wind up being the only common thread between the 4 series in the lead up to the Defenders. Shortly after Luke is admitted to the ER, Jess notices a couple of police officers walk in, most likely under the orders of Kilgrave, and with the help of Claire, once again played by Rosario Dawson, barely manages to sneak Luke out of the hospital and back to her apartment. Claire agrees to look after Luke, able to alleviate the pressure caused by the point-blank shotgun blast to the face by sticking a syringe through his eyes, the only part of him that isn't entirely unbreakable, while Jess goes to track down Kilgrave. We learn that he's unsatisfied with Albert's effort to increase his abilities, using the remains of his unborn child. Oh, God. But Albert reveals that a full dose of the drug he produced could be enough to allow Kilgrave to control Jessica. Jess manages to use Luke's phone to track Kilgrave to the apartment of a wealthy couple just in time to watch Albert die, and Luke wakes up only to leave and start his own solo series. After a standoff with a group of cops who Kilgrave had enslaved, Jess confronts Kilgrave, who had taken Trish at the wealthy couple's yacht. Kilgrave threatens to kill Trish if Jess doesn't stand still and orders her to let him take her away, ordering Trish to make out with him in the process. When Jess does nothing, Kilgrave, assuming he has control over her again, leaves Trish behind to get a little closer. After doing a couple more test orders, he tells Jess to tell him he loves her. Jess looks at Trish when she says this, since it was a code word they'd set up earlier in the episode, grabs Kilgrave by the throat, and snaps his neck, killing him. Which is my only real problem with the series. I honestly wish they'd introduced this idea of Kilgrave trying to increase his powers earlier on in the series, because this scene has almost no tension by the time it comes around. Compare this to, say, the final fight between Matt and Fisk in Daredevil Season 1. The first time Matt had tried taking on Fisk, it almost killed him. He'd had to have special armor made for him in order to even stand a chance. Here, it's just, oh, I'm totally under your control, lol, JK, thanks, die. In a season that I felt had been and still is one of the best Marvel's Netflix division has put out, keep in mind I still haven't seen Punisher all the way through, this was my only problem with it. Its anticlimactic final battle. Long story short, Jess gets arrested for murder, Jerry secures her release claiming Jess too was under Kilgrave's control, Trish receives the files her mother kept on IGH, and Jess goes back to running Alias investigations with the help of Malcolm, as they are now being flooded with calls from people asking her to use her powers to help them out. And now that I've recapped the entire season, much to the chagrin of people who haven't seen the first season, ignored my spoiler warning, and didn't skip ahead, let's talk about the characters. The character work in this show is interesting to say the least. At face value, Jessica is your typical hard-nosed private investigator, bit of an alcoholic, very abrasive personality, and refusing help from anyone. But as the series progresses, you learn just how damaged she really is. Most of it stemming from a relationship with Kilgrave. She suffers from PTSD, and at the beginning of the series, any reference to Kilgrave triggers that and forces her to start naming off the streets around her childhood home in an effort to calm the F down. Kristen Ritter delivers a damn fine performance as Jessica, often coming off cold and snarky, while still being warm and accepting when the time calls for it, such as any of her scenes opposite Hope and Malcolm, and ready to deliver the emotions when the time comes for it. Which actually brings us to Kevin. David Tennant destroyed this role, bringing the same suave charm with a lot of vulnerability we saw in his portrayal of 10th Doctor, but he still managed to present it in a way that was so slimy and sleazy that he came off as extremely menacing at times. It's one of those complex villains that the early Marvel Netflix shows really put out well. The Kingpin, Cottonmouth, the Punisher, even though he's more of an anti-hero, all characters who were complex enough to be interesting, and most importantly had defined personalities. And they're all head and shoulders above what the movies have been producing. Loki, Vulture, and Killmonger aside. But the thing I thought made Kilgrave such an effective villain is that if you take away the powers, that type of personality still feels all too real. This next bit is going to be a little heavier than what I'm used to, and it's probably going to be oversimplified as hell since I don't even know how qualified I am to talk about this, but here we go. We've all heard stories about those spoiled brats, usually white men, often from a fairly affluent family, who got so used to getting everything they wanted with no one ever there to tell them no. Kilgrave and his abilities crank that up to 11, not willing to accept responsibility for his action, either blaming his own powers or everyone else for not being able to be straight with him. Even down to the idea that he was so used to hearing people say the word yes, mainly because they had no choice, that he didn't even know that his relationship with Jessica wasn't even in the least bit consensual. And when Jess blindsided him with this revelation, he still refused to accept it right down to the moment.
Spoilers.
And before the comments get flooded with your snowy justice, soy ducks, and whatnot, let's talk about the other characters. Lightning round!
You know who people hate more than litigators? Puppy killers.
Jerry is awesome yet extremely flawed as a character. Carrie-Anne Moss brought this badass element that, while she still came off as your stereotypical TV lawyer, a bit self-centered, she had a very defined and entertaining personality.
God damn it, Malcolm, you scared the shit out of me.
What are you doing in my apartment?
This is my apartment.
That's why it's not crunchy.
Malcolm was kind of just there. Sure, there was a very brief arc of him getting over his drug abuse in the span of an episode. I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure it takes more than a day to get over heroin.
As well as a slightly longer arc that has him dealing with his own PTSD while running the Kilgrave Victim Support Group.
But that arc doesn't really go anywhere. Not even in Season 2, which focuses more on his job with Alias investigations. Which is a damn shame because Eka Darville put on a really good performance here.
Well, ultimately, it's going to be a lightweight, highly durable fabric, waterproof, flame-resistant, and it will hide your identity.
No.
Trish was there to serve as Jessica's moral compass and support. While she didn't have much development as the series progressed, she was always there to help Jess out, even going so far as to accept help from a mother who basically abused her when she was younger, treating her more like a commodity than her child. Trish and Malcolm would show up in The Defenders, but those are more glorified cameos. Trish's own development wouldn't come till Season 2, focusing on her own past.
You're responding well to the meds.
Feels good. Like old times. Give me a ride.
Will, or as he's known in the comics, Nuke, is an asshole. His development went from him being a slightly likable former mercenary turned police officer who happened to be a victim of Kilgrave's powers to kind of a bloodthirsty killer. Originally I thought he'd be the eventual villain for Season 2, but...
Spoilers.
My name is Ruben. I'm her neighbor. I made her banana bread.
His sister was a pain in the ass, and I'm pretty sure he was only added to the series to be killed to serve as motivation for said pain in the ass.
Hey, why don't we ask her?
Because she clearly doesn't understand jack about Cordon Bleu.
She was a pain in the ass, and she doesn't do anything after this season. While not entirely perfect, as of this recording, this is easily my second favorite out of the Marvel Netflix shows. My favorite, as of this recording, still being the first season of Daredevil. Though, keep in mind, I still haven't finished The Punisher yet. Jessica does kind of go through her own journey of going from a slightly alcoholic, overly sarcastic recluse to a slightly alcoholic, overly sarcastic, reluctant heroine. The serialized nature of the Marvel Netflix series was a boon to this show, as actions in one episode would always lead to consequences in the next episode. Admittedly, it could have been done better with actions having consequences seen further down the line as well, but there's still a very compelling story being told over 13 episodes. It made you want to continue watching episode after episode until it hits you with its admittedly anticlimactic finish. All in all, if you haven't watched this series yet, do it. Bum a friend's Netflix password if you have to, but go watch this show. Okay, yeah, it's available on Blu-ray and DVD as well, but that's like 3 to 4 times the cost, and I really wouldn't recommend that unless you live in an area with terrible Wi-Fi that can't support Netflix. I'm KiraKennedy, and keep on Oh god, I think I threw up in my mouth a little.
No, I'll be the stone. I'll be the hunter, a tower that casts a shade.
Peanut butter disaster.